Welcome everyone to another SBSN English show. Today I'll be discussing The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula le Guin. Today I'm joined by no one, all alone, except for my good friend in the background, looking over my shoulder, keeping an eye on me. Amazing book, Wizard of Earthsea, amazing author. What do we make of it? Is it Harry Potter? Not even close. This is a very serious book, disguised as a fantasy novel for young people. Adults could learn from this. Our dear leaders could learn from this novel. It's a dangerous novel, as I like to say about many novels that I teach. So, what makes it dangerous? What doesn't? Let's begin with chapter 1. Dunny, his home life. What is the author telling us about our world through Dunny and indeed through the entire novel? Everything has some relevance to where we are today, and perhaps even more so than it was relevant when it was first published in 1968. Regarding Dunny's home life, Dunny, obviously he's abused, neglected. Not everyone is abused, but neglected, I believe, is the norm. And mentally abused, also the norm. How are we neglected? I believe children in the US have about an hour or two of so-called quality time with their parents. What does quality time mean nowadays? Shopping together, sitting in front of a TV together. That's just neglect. Nowadays, everyone has their own screen, so spending time doing nothing but passively absorbing entertainment on a screen, even that experience has been mostly lost. We no longer go to cinemas now that we are in Corona world. So yes, neglect is the norm, unless you consider outsourcing your children to teachers, outsourcing parenting to teachers and iPods and cell phones as a form of parenting. Well, I don't think that deserves any comment. Intellectual abuse. Obviously, the amount of BS our young people are immersed in, exposed to, forced to swallow is unconscionable, revolting. It's infuriating, frankly. As a teacher or as a private tutor, I'm constantly dealing with or hearing the BS our young people are forced to study and swallow. And so it's not surprising that they may have some anger issues, attention deficit issues. The attention deficit comes from, to some extent at least, the material that does not deserve the attention of our young people. I applaud them for falling asleep and not paying attention to the BS they deal with at schools. Of course, the abuse in the novel is perhaps the primary cause of Ged's need to overcome his shadow. His shadow, I think, represents all the negative energy he has accumulated during his childhood, and that he struggles to erase from himself, to overcome by means of a painful and exhausting journey through the self, through his own psyche, if you will. This is the kind of education that our schools and our parents need to give our children. Not this tasteless, useless facts and drivel. Knowledge in our world, and perhaps even in an ideal world, will require some pain, some effort, emotional effort, not just the effort we talk about when we say we spent hours and hours studying and trying to focus. No, emotional effort, dealing with truths that are hard to swallow, not because they're boring and not interesting, but because they are true and they conflict with our beliefs. Beliefs that are founded on bullshit. Beliefs that are doing us harm. Perhaps that's sufficient for the topic of Dooney's psychology. Well, perhaps we could add that the lack of love he experienced at his home, without a mother and an abusive father, is the primary reason why he slips into wanting and needing attention and wanting to do things that win him attention, fame. It's all for his pride, and it is not a healthy expression of his humanity. It's a sad direction and a sad grasping for the love he needed. And I actually hesitate to use the word love. I don't think we know what it means anymore. Probably deserves its own podcast. Love has become a desperate needing for other people's attention, monopolizing them, possessing them. It's not a useful thing as such. It's damaging to the person who is the object of love as much as the person who is loved. Second topic, let's discuss magic and religion. Oh, magic. To make this book relevant, obviously we can't assume that it is about magic. Magic is not a serious and issue in our world. It's a minor source of entertainment. I think Ursula le Guin wished for us to interpret magic as a symbol for technology, the technology that, like magic, at least magic in this novel, gives us power over the natural world, over others. In the first instance in which magic is used, Ged has learned his aunt's spell for controlling the goats. And control and power attracts him, perhaps because it's a form of revenge against the control and power his father abused while raising Duni. In any case, the spell backfires. The goats encircle and chase frightened Ged, and the lesson seems clear. This power is dangerous, and that was just the first sign of it. In the same chapter, of course, Ged does use magic for good, to create the mist that protected his village from the Kargs, I believe they were called. Now, when I say magic represents technology, we can make a good argument that, in fact, technology can, like magic in a novel, influence the weather, create the mist, like Ged created a mist. On my website, I have a handout, a document that explores and documents, indeed, how far science has gone and how far technology have gone in so far as it can now influence the climate. I should say perhaps the weather. This is not a new technology. The book was written in 1968. I believe by that time, the American military was already using technology to influence weather in war zones, war theaters. Famously in Vietnam, rain-making technology was used to make supply lines, supply roads unusable. Here's my little handout on this subject, Introduction to Geoengineering, otherwise known as climate modification, weather control, and a host of other terms, commonly dismissed as a conspiracy theory by people who hesitate to research the facts that are out in the open. Plenty are hidden, but plenty are out in the open. So CBS News recently discussing a spraying method that's meant to curb global warming. Of course, they like to introduce these technologies as if they might be used in the future. They're already being used. You can watch it happening in the skies above your head. Just pay attention to nature a little more instead of your screens or our screens, and we might notice. There's a little Diagram here from Live Science, lots of reference hyperlinks to articles. A recent article published titled, "Australia is one of 47 countries globally that makes rain by cloud seeding. Why are they not using it to extinguish the fires?" Good question. 22nd conference on planned and inadvertent weather modification. I'll just scroll through this quickly. Difference between contrails and chemtrails. There's a big difference. That said, contrails are also toxic. Might as well call them chemtrails too. Excellent discussion. Was that at the United Nations? Yes, it was. Rosalind Peterson warning very strongly against this technology. Evidence in our media, or discussions in our media. German news reports on chemtrailing. Here it is. I think that was also a meteorologist. China is very open about its geoengineering. A very disturbing and concerned man presenting his own findings to a probably disbelieving peers. Scholarly research in this subject. They are not researching hypotheticals here. They are researching and developing a field of knowledge that already exists and is already being applied. Independent researchers, documentary, lots of good documentaries on this subject. And the history of geoengineering, businesses. There is one in Australia. There's the North American, what did they do? The NAWMC, the Weather Modification Council. And you can work for various states, helping them modify the weather, probably departments of agriculture. The Weather Generator Project, a business corporation in the Middle East. Volkswagen tried to control the weather and upset some local farmers in Mexico. There is no lack of evidence of humans playing God, playing magicians with the weather. Of course, this is never discussed by the global warming, climate change people. Wouldn't want to draw attention to how we are deliberately and somewhat secretly playing with the weather and perhaps the climate. Anything else in our good novel on this subject? Oh, of course, there's a small reference in one of the chapters to wizards who like to move clouds about from one island to the next. None of the wizards want rain, so it keeps getting moved about. It's quite a absurd state of affairs and absurd use of magic, I suppose. I think that was just as that reference to those wizards appeared shortly before Ged arrived at the island of Rook. I'm relying on my memory. It's been a while since I read this novel, and I do not have a copy on hand. So, education, yes, after leaving his home, forget what that island was called, he is taken by Ogion, the great wizard, to be educated by him, since apparently he's spotted some potential in Ged. formerly known as what was his name? 3 names he has. Dooney, Ged, and later Sparrowhawk. In any case, Ged's experience with sparrows, with Ogion, does not go so well. He complains that he's learning nothing, following Ged about on the island through the wilderness day after day. What was Ogion trying to teach his young student? Simple lesson: how to live in harmony with nature, not to mess up, not to attempt to wield unnecessary control over nature, a form of control that will always backfire, as it is doing, of course, every day as I speak. We are swamped in technologies, magical technologies that can do all manner of magical wonders, including playing with the weather, allowing us to fly through the air on wheels or on wings, allowing us to communicate remotely, to record, as I'm doing. Though I'd prefer to be speaking to a live audience. Perhaps all this technology will backfire and people will, in part thanks to these videos, understand the danger of the technology I'm actually using to communicate this. Indeed, Wi-Fi technology is, or wireless technology generally, is not healthy for us. There's another conspiracy theory that a little research may confirm. G5 is, I think, now the politically correct phrase, whatever we wish to call it, will be beamed down upon our heads from outer space. We are electric bodies operating on different wavelengths. I think our brains, what did I hear recently? 40 hertz? I'm not sure, but everything all our wireless technology is interfering with that, helping to make us sick. Our laboratory-made pharmaceutical drugs, all this is playing God, attempting to be magicians, and all this is backfiring. One only has to look at the number of medical malpractice cases reported yearly in the United States alone. I believe 250,000 a year. That's a conservative estimate. It's one of the leading causes of death. And that was a death number, by the way, 250,000. Blamed on medical malpractice. Of course, our good doctors are protected by, what are they, legally somehow they are immune to being sued. In any case, perhaps enough on technology. I think there are 2 cases in which Ged attempted to resurrect the dead, succeeded the second time while he was on Rook. The consequences, of course, were nearly deadly for himself and nearly deadly for the wizard who helped him out of this situation. Can't quite remember. Again, the message was clear. Don't mess with the natural order. cannot resurrect dead people. Death is part of the natural cycle of life. And of course, it's one of the most important details that we need to understand, learn to understand, learn to live in harmony with. Something our education system makes no effort to do. We would rather have you spend all day learning math equations and geometry, biology with no connection to the cycle of life. Never mind the carbon cycle, the mineral cycle, our electric bodies, no research done into that, no research done into our strong connection to the plant world. Basically, they attempt to teach you how to become magicians, creators and users of new technologies. Let's move on to medicine. I did mention it already. There is one episode, I believe, in which Ged attempts to save a man's dying child and fails, despite having defeated dragons, despite having thwarted an army, despite having resurrected a spirit, not quite a living thing, but at least a spirit. He cannot save a dying child. All the magic in the world, most talented magician, Ged, failed. What was the author's message? Perhaps that magic, technology, of course, is not the way to revive and bring health to sick people. Now that's a message for Bill Gates and company, our medical schools. They're abject failures. We've never been sicker. By we, I mean our species has never been sicker than it is at this time. There are some notable exceptions, but on average, the amount of sickness is mind-boggling. I'm not talking about coronavirus. I'm talking about staggering, absolutely staggering cancer rates, diabetes rates, heart disease, autoimmune disorders that might soon overshadow all the other numbers. I myself am a victim of a little autoimmune disorder called fibromyalgia. Thank goodness my doctor was realistic about his patient and honest enough to tell me there was nothing he could do about it, and that immunologists, the experts, don't know what they're doing. That was the best thing he could have told me, considering the situation that most doctors don't know how to cure, dare I use the word cure, our autoimmune disorders. How could they? Can they clean up my environment? Can they clean up the planet? Get rid of the 30, 60,000 chemicals, man-made chemicals that are probably, to a large extent, toxic to everything that lives? Can they stop the electromagnetic pollution of atmosphere? Can they clean up our food system? Well, they can recommend I eat organic food, and even better, raw organic food, but they don't. They could. And even good organic food is hard to find. Perhaps next to impossible. Not only because the problem isn't simply pesticides and herbicides, it's soils depleted of nutritional or nutrients or minerals. We are strip mining our soils. Farms are mining operations. They harvest plants full of valuable minerals, increasingly less full. And what do they return to the soil? 3 minerals, not dozens, not 100, which is what our plants need. So, Dooney fails to revive and to heal and cure the child. Strong message for us as we are getting sicker by the year. The introduction of G5 will not help. A little research I've done will explain the facts about that. I recommend Arthur Fistenberg's book, as well as another book recently bought for my daughter, Radiation Nation. I still have some memory left. This is getting close to everything I need to say about this book. Perhaps this is the most debatable connection I'd like to make. Something tells me this book may have been inspired by another book, probably by many books, but particularly this one. Well, why not throw out 2? The Chrysalids and Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche. Careful, what's the word? Examination of these 2 texts will find some parallels. The shadow, for instance, the whole journey which Goethe undergoes, the journey which begins with great difficulty and ends with a success, bears some resemblance to Thus Spake Zarathustra. I much prefer that connection to other illusions or influences. Perhaps Carl Jung and Freud might be brought up. I don't think those are very useful. Influences, if they were influences. Why the name Earthsea? Why all the names? Ged, Ogion, Rook, Sparrowhawk, Yarrow, is it Jasper? Authors tend to choose their names for important reasons, or for good reasons. And in a novel in which naming is itself a theme, it would be a good idea to look carefully at all these names Um, what do we make of the claim that magicians wield power when they have the true name of an object? We can't really take that literally. Not even magicians can do that. So what does this mean? Is it a little bit like governments who have access to all our personal information, our names being first and foremost, but certainly not the all or everything that they wish to have in terms of knowledge of us? We presently live in a total surveillance world. Our governments like to know everything about us. That's how they manage us, control us. Bill Gates, I believe, is dreaming of the getting us all registered, medically registered, whether we have vaccine records or not. I think he wants vaccine records of everyone, perhaps with a RF implant. And if you haven't accepted the vaccine, your freedom might be curtailed, as if it isn't already curtailed, obliterated. Freedom to do what? Freedom of movement. I'm already presently restricted to sidewalks and stores. Not that I abide by these rules, these restrictions, but that is how they would have it. Welcome to Animal Farm. Of course, in our novel, names change. At least Dooney's name changes into Ged, and later into Sparrowhawk. What is the message there? I think Ged is borrowed from old Egyptian mythology, a god by the name of Ged, or something similar, represented nature, I believe. And that again emphasizes the theme of leaving our home and moving towards nature, our home being a place where technology is rampant and absolutely out of control. Ged's father is a blacksmith. Blacksmiths, you might say, represent in some sense, the origin of technology. Or should I call it rather metallurgy, represents the beginning of technology. Look, we could go back further to fire, but I think it's fair to make a connection, a less tenuous connection with metallurgy, or the casting of metals, blacksmiths, and technology. And of course, Ogion represents a man who is in harmony with nature, unlike Ged's father. Now, Ged isn't ready for that shift, so he ends up being attracted to the school at Rook. And that appears to be a little bit like Hogwarts in the Harry Potter series. A place where you can learn spells that will create, as Jasper created, a tree made of precious gems and stone, and not sure what it was, not a living tree, not life. Just as our scientists presently, our engineers, propose to make fake trees that will absorb carbon dioxide and fight that boogeyman carbon dioxide. As if living trees couldn't do that far more affordably and provide many other benefits aside from carbon sequestration. After he's named Ged, he also becomes, I believe it's after, but I could be wrong, he also is named Sparrowhawk. This is quite clearly a reference to nature, perhaps also a reference to the Native American people traditions. They were quite fond of naming themselves after animals and other natural phenomena. And indeed, this book has quite a few characters named after animals and plants. Naming people after plants, I think, was not part of the Native American tradition. So in this sense, from this, this suggests that the author has gone into new territory. This is not the place. This is not the place to explain why the native people did not name one another after plants. There may have been a bias there. That's a subject for another podcast, possibly. So many podcasts to do, so little time. Other characters. Ogion, what do we make of him? The letters O-G in some languages mean I. He seems to be all-seeing. He does have a way of knowing what Ged is doing even while he's not present. Other characters, I think it was Vetch, named after a plant, a little flowering perennial. The novel ends with Sparrowhawk. I forget the name of the island, but he's there with his one good friend, Vetch, and Vetch's sister and brother. What were their names? Yarrow, the girl, named after a herb, and is it Muir, the brother, named after a bird. The pattern seems clear. Sparrowhawk's progress, his journey, has brought him back to nature, back to a people who appreciate nature, back to people who live in harmony with nature. I believe Muir does not even know magic. And one good sign that Ged has made some progress and arrived at a good state of mind is a little joke he made. Perhaps not the best joke, but it made Yarrow laugh, if I'm not mistaken, in the last chapter. It's a very positive sign. We must all have a sense of humor, especially in this time when the powers that be, the mainstream media, seem determined to pollute us all with irrational fears, degrade our intelligence with lies designed to keep us in a state of fear, in a state of fear of nature. Our own bodies are now threats. Other people are now threats to us. Apparently, parks are now a threat to us. Bats and other animals blamed for other viruses are threats to us. There was, of course, the famous bird flu, the swine flu. No, the only threat on this planet, the biggest threat, is humanity, and the half humans who think they are human, who are too busy playing God with all their technology. They are the big threats. And we must do our best to create a world without them, or we won't be here much longer, I'm afraid. Not at least in a half decent state of health. Most of us who are in good health, at least by modern standards, have no idea how much healthier we could be. Just because you don't have cancer or malignant cancer does not make us healthy. The energy level is continually declining, and we must resist this. I hope this has been energizing. My energy level is usually quite high. I wish everyone well, and I will be back with another podcast. Hopefully, some of my young friends will join us. With that, this is the end of another SBSN English show. Wishing you all well and good health, and perhaps a little revolution. Good night, all.